I was really striving for that balance of keeping the business alive, keeping myself alive in terms of who I was as a person, and then also being this really nurturing, conscious, present mum that I wanted to be. And I think I had to almost redefine balance as almost contentment and finding moments where I was just so purely content with what I had and truly appreciating and being grateful for that, knowing that other moments of our life are going to be more chaotic or more busy or, so it was almost like appreciating those slower, more content moments where I would get a few hours of work each day, but I'd get a full day with my daughter, and then maybe I'd get a dinner date with a girlfriend, and, Saturday night on the couch with my husband where our daughter didn't, wake up or something like that.
Yeah.
That became my balance, or that became my contentment of I've got a little bit of everything right now, but also knowing that it's not always going to be like that, and that's okay.
Welcome to The Balance Theory, a podcast aimed at arming you with tools and tips so that you are well equipped to not only identify and define, but own your own definition of balance. I'm your host, Erica, and thank you for joining me today. Hey Balancers, and welcome back to another episode of the Balance Theory podcast. I just want to kick off today's pod by wishing a very happy Mother's Day to any mamas listening out there, and a special mention to my own beautiful mama who I know is listening to this right now. Very fitting, and I couldn't have planned it better myself. Today we actually have a beautiful mama on the podcast. I am joined by Madelyn Carafa, who is not only a mama, but she's also the creator and host of The Healthy Hustlers, a podcast you guys may or may not have heard of. But if you haven't checked it out, I strongly suggest you add it to your favorites for your weekly listens, as that one is a leading health and wellbeing podcast in Australia, and basically is a series of healthy conversations with some of the most inspiring and influential people in the health and wellbeing industry. It's one I always turn to just listen to a really insightful and raw conversation. So if you get a lot out of today's episode, you're going to absolutely love the podcast. So like lots of you listening, Madelyn did start out in a corporate 9-to-5. However, after many years of climbing the never-ending corporate ladder, she waved goodbye to that job title and salary that she once thought defined her success and embarked on a life full of good health, nourishing conversations, and a career that actually fulfills her soul. She's now mama to daughter Georgia Florence, and she has a holistic view on health with the belief that a happy mindset creates a healthy life. And through a lot of storytelling today, we're going to dive into a lot of her core beliefs, spiritual practices, and general outlook on how to have a healthy hustle, which absolutely seems to feel like the balance theory flavor of the month. So I'm just going to rattle off two hypothetical people, and if you identify with either of these, then you are going to get so much out of today's episode, and I'm so excited for you. So the first is you're either someone who has a really demanding job, so you spend a lot of time in your actual job, or maybe you have your own business, and so physically that demands a lot from you in terms of your time. And you really want to create more space for yourself, for your self-care, and just to do more things that you want to do. That's one basket of people. The second is maybe you're currently in a role or doing a job that you're not fully in tune with. Now, that's not to say everyone needs to have a job that they're obsessed with, because I think that's not always feasible. However, if there is something else that you want and you just have that feeling that you want to be doing something more or different to pursue something that you're really passionate about, then tighten your seatbelt, because this one's also for you. Now, if you don't fit into either of these baskets, you're still going to get a lot out of today's episode. But the reason I've highlighted those two specific categories is because Madelyn and I actually go through a little bit of a Q&A where we talk about strategies on how those two types of individuals can start actually either making more space or taking steps towards their passion. So I tried to make this one as practical as possible, because I think it's all well and good to listen to people's suggestions and opinions and thoughts, but if we don't know how to apply them practically, or we can't see steps on how we can actually do that ourselves, often we just hear these things and that's it. They stay on your Apple Podcast app and never get integrated into your life. So I hope you guys get a lot out of that segment. That's more towards the end. But between then and now, you can expect a little bit of a history as to how Madelyn actually came up with the Healthy Hustlers podcast and concept. And in and amongst that is her transition from corporate into her passion job, which I found super interesting. as this is a journey I would love to embark on myself. So it's not actually something I've shared a lot on the podcast, but I would love to full-time be working in my side business, which is ESFit, for those of you who haven't heard me ramble on about it on other episodes, and maybe do podcasting full-time. Who knows? Still early days, but that's why I love that this specific chat. It's always really cool to hear how other people have done it, and it kind of gives me that, well, if that person did it, then I can probably do it too. It's a nice little driver. We also chat about struggling with burnout, why we need to create awareness in our lives, and why that's actually important before you even start thinking about making space for yourself. Once we get the awareness bit right and down pat, we can actually then talk about how to create space. So this is all a little bit of a cycle that we go through together today. We also talk about how to work out what lights you up. So I've actually received so many messages from some of you who ask, like, how do I know what I'm passionate about? How do I know what I enjoy? So we actually talk a little bit about that. We speak about when juggling a lot of balls, working out or distinguishing which ones are glass and which ones are plastic, which I love because it gives you that flexibility that you can drop some at some point. It's just identifying which ones will survive and which ones won't. Of course, how to make the hustle healthy, getting over that guilty feeling for your self-care, finding your purpose, and lastly, creating awareness around what's serving you and what's not. I know you guys are going to get so much out of today's pod, so get open your notes or your notepad if that's your vibe, because even when I went back and did all my editing, I just took away so much more the second time round as well. Feel free to share this with a friend or family member who you think might enjoy it. Knowledge is so much more powerful when it's shared. Take a screenshot, tag myself and Madelyn, let us know what your biggest takeaways were, and I can't wait to hear all your thoughts on today's podcast. Let's dive straight in. Wonderful. Madelyn, welcome to the Balance Theory podcast. It's such an honor to have you on today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Likewise. And as I mentioned to you off air, I've got downstairs doing renovation. So if anyone hears any random hammering or tapping throughout the podcast, that's what it is. But I think they're going to hold off until the end of our show, which is really nice of them.
That is. I'm glad we could make it work.
Yeah. Now, the whole reason I guess I was drawn to your podcast to start off with was actually the title, The Healthy Hustlers. I love that. I think it's genius. I think it speaks to so much of what I'm trying to do with our podcast as well, in terms of achieving balance and bringing like elements of healthiness into the busyness of our day-to-day lives. And so I would love to know, how did the inspiration for the Healthy Hustlers come about, and what does that actually mean for people who may not have come across your podcast yet?
Yeah, of course. Well, firstly, I love that you love the name. It's so funny. It's actually something that's really worked in my favor in the podcast space, because a lot of people have said to me, they've just jumped on the podcast app and typed in healthy and mine's popped up. And I was like, oh, okay, that's awesome. It was totally unintended. And so I think it was just a combination of that. And then I started to realize, well, you know, my life is so out of sync. You know, every other facet of my life except my career is at an all-time low. So maybe I need to take a step back and really start prioritizing this. So, you know, I just started doing little things like meditation, eating healthy, you know, a few of those, making a bit more time for me. And there was amazing results, which was pretty cool. And all of a sudden I started to think, oh my goodness, there's actually something in this. And it over time became a bit of an obsession, to be honest. I ended up literally quitting that job because I realized that it actually wasn't fueling my soul at all. It was knocking a lot of my confidence. It wasn't giving me the space to be healthy. And so I got a job back in Melbourne. And it was just, I think during that time, I created space. And I think space is a really important piece in anything in your life. If you are trying to find balance, or, you know, you want that next thing, or, you know, for me, I always had this, I guess, inner knowing that I was here for something more. But what I realize now, I wasn't giving myself the space for that to actually happen in my life. So the Healthy Hustlers honestly came about because I was prioritizing my health. As a result, I was walking to work every day. I had an hour to think, to be a little bit more creative. And the name, and I know this will sound really woo-woo to some people, but the only way I can honestly describe it is that it was a download from the universe. I literally was walking through the botanical gardens. I'll never forget it. And I was just really thinking about all the things that I missed in my life, like from a work perspective. What were my strengths? What really lit me up? And then all of a sudden it just like dropped into my head. You need to do a podcast. And the name is The Healthy Hustlers. Like, it was so weird. And it's the only way I can describe it to you. And I called I started it originally with a girlfriend. I called her and I was like, oh my God, I've just had this idea. Like, I want to interview people, like, you know, that are at the top of their game and find out their healthy habits. And, you know, it could be called The Healthy Hustlers because they're all healthy, but they're still hustling. And it just, went from there. So that was a really long-winded answer, but it was definitely, I think, came from a place of creating space in my life for an opportunity like that to be given to me, you know, for the universe to actually say to me, okay, you're ready now to step up and to give this your best.
I love that so much. And there's so many bits in there I want to dive into, but I think the most important thing there is, like, you acknowledge that you were at a point where other areas of your balance are being totally neglected. And so just to give everyone who maybe hasn't listened to our podcast before, the whole concept of the balance theory is that you've got your health, you've got your relationships, and you've got your area of fulfillment. So that, you know, because I called it fulfillment instead of career, because I feel like you've got full-time mums, for example, who don't work, and they don't necessarily always fit the work/career box.
Yep.
So that's why I've called that one fulfillment. So in your life, you will categorize or prioritize parts of you to each of those areas in different elements. But I think you have to have some eggs in each of those baskets at all times. So it sounds like from back in your marketing days, you were kind of all in your fulfillment area and nothing in the other areas. And I think that that's when we often lean into burnout. And what you said about every time you went on a work trip, you came back sick. That was literally me when I was studying, when I was going through law school. I was like, the second exams were over and I had that 4-week break, I was sick as, you know, it was like I just gave my body that space and it just rushed to like process everything it should have been processing ongoingly. So I think like the biggest takeaway from everything you've said there is creating that space. And I know we're going to go into some specific scenarios, but for anyone listening now who might resonate, you know, they might be that law student who's just pumping out their work, or they may be like working in a corporate job 9 to 5, and they feel like they really just don't have that space. What do you think is the simplest thing they can start with to just get that happening and sort of, because that's the only really way you can listen to yourself, right?
Definitely. 100%, you know, and I think before this, creating the space, the awareness needs to come, you know, as I said, I become aware that I was lacking in every other aspect of my life. So, you know, there's so many different exercises you can do, but even just sitting with yourself for a moment and actually assessing how you feel about all of those different baskets in your life, you know. And I love that you call it fulfillment, because, you know, for me now, primarily my full-time job is being a mum. So my job now is actually my fulfillment. Like, I am so driven by when I'm working. So I love that you call it that. But I think, you know, I still try to sit back and have those moments of, okay, what's lacking? What area am I lacking in? Is it in your social life? Have you, especially after last year, are you lacking there? Is it in your relationships with your friends? Are you not having those kind of real conversations? Is it in your career? And really being honest with yourself. And I think that's, as soon as you bring that awareness, you can then start to create space or to work on that area. So if it's in your social life, you might not be going out as much as you'd like, or maybe you're going out too much. Like either, you can kind of, once you have that awareness, you can bring it back and make those changes. But I think for actually creating space from a creative perspective, mine was always from a creative space, and to be able to really tap into my intuition. Like I said, I always knew I was here for something more. I just needed to be able to actually tap into that. And that, when I refer to the universe or whatever, at the end of the day, that's my intuition. That's strengthening that. So I definitely think, for me, and I know it's not for everyone, but meditation was probably the most powerful thing. And I did start really slow. I literally just put guided meditations on at night to go to sleep. And then over time, I saw the impact of that was having. And so then I was more open to doing it during the day. Like now I would never start a work day without usually doing a meditation and pulling an angel card, an oracle card. And so I think, find something that works for you. Meditation might not. It might be a walk in nature, or your local park or down the beach without music on, like just for your mind to have time to pause and to think and to tune into your body. I think another beautiful one, if you are going to just start it slow with a walk or something, which is so powerful, like don't underestimate the power in that. But if there's no music on, like even just feeling your body when you walk, like your feet on the pavement or the beach, the wind in your face, like what sounds are around you, really just, that's what I mean by creating space. And over time, by prioritizing that and by doing that, you're actually just going to strengthen that relationship with your intuition, and you're going to be able to actually start to hear and feel those messages come through. It's definitely a work in progress. Like don't expect to just do it once and you're going to have all the answers. This was for me, 6 years ago. But then now I can honestly say that I'm in a place where I'm pretty led by my intuition. I make, I would say 99% of my decisions based on my intuition, but that has taken years of strengthening. And, I've definitely fallen out of that, and I, have to then do the work to get back into it. So I think all of this stuff takes work. So you have to be ready to make that change.
For sure. And it's like it's anything like a muscle, like this, the more you work it, the more you rest and recover and train it, the stronger it's going to get. And so the more you lean into your thoughts or observe them and feel how your body's feeling, the easier it's going to become. But the only thing I would add to everything that you said there about, bringing that awareness piece before you can make space, when you're in that awareness part, it really is about, you've got to be careful you're not stuck in a loop where you're like, okay, what should I be doing? Because for example, if you're, in an early phase of your business and you've really got to focus a lot on that, and you see your friends every so often, but you would, in an ideal world, like to see them more, but right now your time's limited, then don't feel guilty about that. Know that, right now that's what you need to be doing to reach the goals that you want to reach. And if you can't make space for that or integrate that right now, it's about kind of just owning your balance and knowing that if you want to achieve your goals, you need to do certain things. And I think we always get torn between what you should be doing and what you want to be doing, kind of like, or what you can be doing. So it's like, remove the obligation piece and just like focus on your goals, where you're headed, that kind of thing.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I think that, sometimes comes down to a bit of comparison as well. Like, not looking over to other people's lanes and what they define, if it's success or busy or, having a passion project, as what it actually feels like for you. And I think, I've definitely been caught in that trap of comparison, and it's coming back to your own heart and to what feels right to you. How do you define these things? What does it look like for you? I know when I first started the Healthy Hustlers, it was so important to me, and my social life wasn't. I knew that when I was going out and socializing, I was almost feeling guilty for doing that, because all I wanted to be doing was working on my business. But then now I'm almost in a point where I'm like, oh, okay, so I need to up my social life a little bit, because I'm like, that needs to fuel my soul. So bringing that awareness to what actually lights you up, being more mindful in situations as well. When you are with your friends and you're out and about, like, how does it make you feel? Does it allow you to be the best version of yourself? Does it make you like the next 2 or 3 days just be like on the top of your game and firing? Or does it make you feel depleted, exhausted, overwhelmed, And then I know we'll probably dive into this a bit more, but then almost setting those boundaries around that so you can create that space in your life.
Yeah. And I love that you just brought this up too, because balance is not like a static or fixed thing either. And it's something that's going to chop and change. Like, I don't have kids yet, but I'm sure you can vouch for the fact that as soon as, your baby came into this world, your idea of balance completely shifted. Your priorities were turned on their head, and things you may have found, I don't know, great for your routine before or useful are now no longer it. Just a quick word from the sponsor of today's podcast. If you haven't paid any attention to the quality of your gym accessories or feel like the ones you have kill your vibe just a little, then this is for you. ESFit is a brand I've co-founded with my best friend to bring all fitness lovers the confidence to sweat in style. I'm talking considered luxe fitness accessories, ranging from cotton bands that don't roll or dig to full-size sweat towels that cover you from head to toe and actually don't take up all the space in your bag. The list goes on, but you can check it all out for yourself at esfit.com.au or on Instagram at esfit_. And for all my beautiful balancers, we're offering $15 off at the checkout when you use the code BALANCE. So I guess like that's a little bit about you and your balance. Now I want to know, since you've now become a mother, you've now like understood, I guess, and how to create that space in your life and your own relationship with your balance and your calling. How do you actually avoid burnout and stay on top of your balance?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. And I'm still, it's a work in progress, like you were just saying, it's one of these things that we always need to be constantly reassessing. It's not like you just find balance or you find, you create space and then it's just always there. It's a constant work in progress. It's constantly reassessing the pillars of your life and what's thriving and what's not. And a really, great thing that I've been thinking a lot about lately, which my friend Anne Simpson, she's the Gratitude Project on Instagram. She's actually one of my mentors, and I learned so much from her when it comes to self-development and personal growth. And we were having dinner last week and talking about the balls that you have in the air, I guess, and trying to figure out which ones are glass balls and which ones are like a plastic balls. So plastic balls can be dropped for a little bit, but glass balls, when they get dropped, they will literally shatter on the ground and you can't kind of replace them. So it's almost, I guess, in those early days of being a mum, my daughter was, I guess, a glass ball. She needed me for feeding. She needed me to go to sleep. She literally needed me for every single aspect of her life. Whether my business was the plastic ball, it could afford to be dropped and I could pick it back up when I had the time and the space. So I found that a really beautiful kind of analogy. And I'm a very visual person as well. So in a visual way, it's been a really good thing for me to be able to say, okay, what can I afford to drop right now and what can't afford to smash? And, as much as it's hard to accept sometimes, but my business has been the one thing that has been able to drop. And so whether now I'm in this play, and I think it comes down to honoring that, really honoring your season and really honoring where you are. And, that takes a lot of work. It took me months and months to truly honor my seasons of motherhood. And I think that just comes down to a lot of spiritual growth for me personally. I know everyone will be different, but for me, it was a lot of spiritual growth and really trusting that I am where I'm meant to be and that everything I desire is working out and I'm here for a reason. So, whether now I'm moving into this beautiful new phase where, my daughter's nearly 20, she's 20 months next week. And she's loves being with her nanas and having time away from me. And she puts herself to sleep at night. And, there's all these things that she's not yes, she's dependent on me, but she's not the newborn that's like stuck to me all the time. Yes. So I'm able to pick up that plastic ball, and she almost becomes a bit more of a plastic ball now because I can have days without her. And
Love
So
that.
yeah, I hope that's kind of answered your question in a
No,
roundabout
totally.
way.
Totally.
But I definitely find balance, I think, as becoming a mum as well. I really felt like I was striving for that in the early days. I was really striving for that balance of keeping the business alive, keeping myself alive in terms of who I was as a person, and then also being this really nurturing, conscious, present mum that I wanted to be. And I think I had to almost redefine balance as almost contentment and finding moments where I was just so purely content with what I had and truly appreciating and being grateful for that, knowing that other moments of our life are going to be more chaotic or more busy or, so it was almost like appreciating those slower, more content moments where I would get a few hours of work each day, but I'd get a full day with my daughter, and then maybe I'd get a dinner date with a girlfriend, and, Saturday night on the couch with my husband where our daughter didn't, wake up or something like that.
Yeah.
That became my balance, or that became my contentment of I've got a little bit of everything right now, but
Yeah.
also knowing that it's not always going to be like that, and that's okay.
Totally. And you've honestly hit it bang on the nail. Like the idea of it being your contentment, basically to me is just saying you're owning it. You are comfortable with what your balance looks like today. And it's removing this idea that, oh, you see this person on Instagram and they seem to, like have all these meetings and juggle being a mum and always look amazing and their hair's always great too. Like it doesn't matter about any of that, because if you're happy with how your eggs are sitting in all your baskets and, you appreciate that there are the ups and downs, because I think the concept that if you're balanced, you're linear all the time is just totally unrealistic. And you are going to have those down days and you are going to have those good days. And so acknowledging all of that and being comfortable with all of that will just help you own wherever you are right now. But I am curious to know, like, how do you have any kind of red flags or things that you notice when you're getting kind of close to burnout? Because I always like to talk about burnout a bit like a slide. So you've got total burnout down the bottom, but I think you do have these mini burnouts on the way down. And if you, disregard them or ignore the signs, your body will just make them louder and stronger until it can't scream and yell at you anymore and you're just at burnout. So what are your kind of red flags and how do you kind of stop yourself going all the way down the slide?
Yeah, definitely. And look, it's funny because they're obviously very different for me than they were once upon a time. I used to really, for anyone who is in that grind and that hustle, or, doing a law degree or a university degree while working the three, casual jobs on the side, like I was there. And
Feel ya.
I think that removing that pressure from yourself and almost, it goes back to honoring your season. Like I now can speak from hindsight and say that those earlier days of burnout, like, yes, ideally I would love to not have gone through that because it was tough, but they actually have set me up for success because they've created so much awareness in me at a place in my life where I am able to, I'm more financially stable. I have a business that I know can thrive. I actually have the tools and the know-how to move through that in more of a graceful and considered way. But I wouldn't know that if I hadn't experienced those early years of burnout. So I think, I talk a lot about on my podcast of you are exactly where you're meant to be. And I think, yes, you need to take care of yourself, but also don't feel guilty if it's not the front of your mind. And if you are, doing those late night uni assignments and then getting up to work at a cafe in the morning, know that that is actually teaching you something and you're in that for a reason, and it actually might just propel you later in life. I'm not saying that I want anyone to be sitting there, but I just mean don't feel guilty if you can't find the time. If you want to find the time and you want to have that more balance, there are so many amazing tools, meditation being a great one, the use of affirmations. I've actually just started working with WellWeb, which is a new online platform. It's basically a web of wellness things, but it's the best way I can describe it is almost like a personal development hub. So there's literally something for everyone. So you can go in there as a beginner or, super experienced, and there'll be something for you. So it's everything from movement, spirituality, healthy nutrition, healthy
Wow.
recipes. It's got everything, a one-stop shop. So if you are wanting to prioritize, I guess, self-care and create that space, that could be a really great starting point for you to sign up there and really start, just be open-minded, try some different things, see what works for you. At the moment I'm trying sound healing and breath work, which I've never even done before. So, just have fun with it. Like cut out an hour of your day each day and, prioritize that self-care. But I guess for me, sorry, I went on a bit of a tangent
That's
there away
okay.
from your question.
Tangents are literally my
But
life.
yeah. Oh, I just feel like I know not everyone is, on the journey where I am. So I just never want anyone to feel, like you need to start where I am. You can really start small and just figure out what works for you and what makes you feel good. But yeah, for me now, it definitely is understanding my triggers. So if that's, for me, my triggers towards burnout are very much, frustration towards my husband. I'll get very snappy. If I've had lack of sleep, which usually is resulted in, working too much and then burnout, I wake up feeling crappy. I don't feel energized. I don't feel positive. I like to think I'm quite a positive person, and my mind is usually set on quite a positive channel. So the moment that I am getting a lot of self-doubt, I'm sitting in a place of comparison, I'm, feeling frustrated or in a victim situation, they're my triggers to know that, okay, you're doing too much. You need to take a step back. And I think this year for me personally, I actually took 3 months off work at the start of the year, unintended. It was just going to be 4 weeks, and it just kept going because I just kept getting this call to rest. I just had to rest and restore my body. And I just had to trust that by doing that, it was actually going to propel me in the future. And, I struggled with a lot of creative burnout last year. So I kind of find I don't necessarily, although I did get to a place of burnout last year, more from motherhood and, trying to juggle so many balls and not understanding that I could drop one of them. I think Instagram, as beautiful as it is, and I've made so many wonderful connections, but I think for me going into motherhood, it was quite a trap because I did see those boss mamas, who were out having coffee dates, but also slaying in their business and had a child and looked beautiful in their activewear. And, my reality was completely different. I was depleted. I was exhausted all of the time. I was so resentful that I didn't have time to work on my business, and I was stuck being mum, which sounds horrible now, but that's what my headspace was at that time. And so I've really had to do a lot of work in the last 12 months around, trusting that I am where I am and understanding those triggers in me. And, no one's life is perfect. I launched a whole new series on the podcast, which was Motherhood Chats. And, I've talked to nurturing mums, but who are also killing it in their business. And we all share the same stories. We're all going through the sleepless nights. We're all going through it. So never feel like you're alone in that. And I think that was a big piece of the pie for me, was realizing that I'm on my own journey and I don't need to compare myself to someone else's reality. So, and comparison's just a huge trigger for me. Whenever I'm sitting in that, I know that, I'm getting close to creative burnout.
Yeah, absolutely. And I couldn't agree more that like every life experience is a lesson, even if it feels like you're going through a really crappy time or like, a lot of unpleasant emotions are coming up, like it's teaching you something, or kind of, I love the analogy of when you shoot a bow and arrow, you've got to pull it back before the arrow can go forward. So sometimes when you feel like you're kind of going in a different direction or kind of being pulled negatively, like maybe life's just preparing to slingshot you. And another thing I love that you said was the whole concept of triggers and being aware of them. And one thing I spoke about on an episode I released last week was about our emotional tolerance windows. So you, for example, and I resonate with what you just said, like I can tell I'm burnt out or not myself when I get frustrated quite quickly at my partner with things around the house. That's like something I have a very low tolerance window for, but I'm fully aware of that. That's one thing I've got a really low tolerance window for, whereas something like anger is something I've got a high threshold for. So I don't often get angry or like lash out. So I think being aware of your low emotional windows as well as your triggers will also help you kind of avoid them in moments where you feel like, or at least even notice them, I suppose, when you're getting close to burnout. So couldn't agree more with
Definitely.
everything you've said there. I love
that analogy though of your windows. That's cool. That's
yeah,
really cool.
yeah,
I
no,
like that.
I'll link you the episode I did. It was something I actually learned with my therapist.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
useful to understand. And even when you consider, like, if you're judging somebody else, because let's face it, we all do it subconsciously. If you judge someone, for example, when they get stressed out, but you might have a really high tolerance for stress, you're then projecting your window onto them, but they might have a really small tolerance for stress. So it's a really nice, I think, understanding piece to workshop, I guess, for your own self-development.
Definitely. Yeah, I love that. And, something that I found really interesting from that comparison piece as well, which my coach was talking me through, was every time that I'm comparing myself and when we compare, we usually do pass judgment in a conscious or unconscious way. We're actually telling the universe that we don't want that in our life, or we don't desire that. So I found that a really interesting take as well. And it brought more awareness to when I'm comparing myself of how am I doing that from a place of negativity, or am I doing it from a place of, love? Like comparing, you can still compare in a positive way of, oh, wow, she's doing
like a
wonderful
longing.
things. I'd love to be on that level, or that's so inspiring for me. But when it's coming from a negative place, it's actually doing you more damage, and it's getting you further away from where you're probably desiring to be.
Yeah, that's a great tip, actually, because I think we all naturally experience that comparisonitis, especially just being on social media. So that's a good way to reframe.
Yeah. You never know someone's situation. That's what I always remind myself, is you actually never know what someone is going through. And we see such small snippets of people's lives. And, even I share a lot, having a podcast, you'd be the same. I share a lot about myself, but when you're going through hard things, you can't necessarily teach from that place as well. So last year, when my health was at an all-time low from, after breastfeeding and months of motherhood and juggling a business, I, as a result, suffered from creative burnout, which made me then not want to share exactly where I was, because I couldn't articulate it the way that I wanted. I was in it. I was trying to understand it. So just because, someone is sharing stuff, I was sharing from a place that I already knew, which was positivity, how to get through hard times, not from a place of, okay, my health is at an all-time low. Whether now I'm in a position where my health is so much better, I can share about that, and it's resonating with people so much.
Yeah.
But when I was going through all of that, people wouldn't have realized. And it wasn't because I just wasn't ready to. I didn't know how to share that, So I think to always remember that as well. You just never know what's going on behind closed doors for someone. And the quote, everyone's I'm going to butcher it. But everyone's fighting an inner battle that you know nothing about, is basically the concept of it. So yeah.
100%. Like I had very close friends. They actually broke up the other week, and another friend unrelated to them of mine said, oh my God, but like I saw on the Instagram, they look so happy. They're always going out, blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like I know what's been going on with them, but you just never know. So that's a great thing to remember.
So true.
Yeah. Before I let you go, though, I do want to workshop 2 ideas that I think will resonate a lot with our audience, and maybe just get some tips on how they can make their hustle healthier, or get into, tap into something where they want to be. So the first one is, let's think an entrepreneur, business owner, or an office worker 9 to 5, who puts in a lot. So they're working a lot of hours, maybe like a lawyer or someone who just works crazy, crazy hours. And they're in this mindset of, if I don't put in this amount of effort, nobody else will. Like the business won't survive without me. And they kind of feel like their personal life's being sacrificed as well as a result of having to achieve their goals. So maybe actually you'll resonate quite well, because that was maybe you when you were in your marketing role. What's something, like maybe just 1 or 2 things that they could really start looking at or doing straight away to try and make some more time for their personal life?
Yeah, I think, I definitely think self-care, is a really important tool. And I think, if you take the approach that you can't give from an empty cup, and the more that you are fulfilling yourself and making yourself feel the best, it's not selfish then to give yourself self-care, because you're actually able to give so much more to your personal life, your friend, your personal life, your family, your career, and everything. So, finding a self-care practice that works for you, and it will be different. It will look different for everyone. It might be a bath and, and a podcast in every Friday night and a glass of wine, or it might be getting your nails done and going to the hairdressers, getting a facial, whatever it looks like. Some people might just like getting up and going for a walk with a friend. It'll look different for everyone. But I think if you can at least start prioritizing self-care, and even if you start slow, it might be 15 minutes a day, and you can work up to 30 minutes a day. And then I'm very big on starting small and making things a habit. So then you don't get overwhelmed by the change. So start small, make it a habit that it becomes second nature, non-negotiable in your life, and then move on to something else.
Yeah, for sure. And I just want to add as well, because someone actually messaged me on Instagram and said, like, I actually don't know what I enjoy. And to that, they were sort of asking me, like, what do I do? And I think that there are so many things out there, like everyone goes on about meditation, journaling, practicing gratitude, affirmations, all these things, but you're really not going to know until you try them out for yourself. And another thing I just wanted to add and ask you actually is, what do you think about though the person who's sitting here, they might be in that role and they think, yep, I know I've got to, do more self-care, but they just feel guilty when they go to do it. And I know I totally agree with the whole cup, you got to fill your cup to give more to others. But how do people, even if they're consciously aware of that, how do they actually get over that guilt? Because I think it's such a problem, like, to be honest with you. And I can only imagine it gets worse as you, become a mum or your responsibilities shift. But there is that underlying guilt. Well, if I'm doing that, I'm actually taking away from hours spent in my work.
Definitely. I think that those things just have to be a mindset shift. It has to come down to what's actually really important to you. And it's funny, like, I guess with everything that I talk about on the podcast, I'm like, I can only tell you what works for me. I can only help to try to positively influence you. I can't make you do something. So I think with anyone that's in that position it really has to come down to if you are willing to make that positive change in your life. And by doing so, you need to change the story that you're telling yourself. And I think, one of the easiest ways, if you were literally that time poor, one of the easiest ways is affirmations, because they're so easy. They don't take time, but they do require commitment. And I actually just did a whole episode this week on affirmations and the power of them. And I think it's just helping to rewrite that negative story that you're telling yourself. So if you are telling yourself that story that, I just don't have the time, or I don't have, this. Yeah, you need to use an affirmation that every time that story pops up in your head, you can override it with this affirmation, and you can reground yourself, center yourself, and then go into your self-care practice in a much more positive manner.
Yeah, love that. And it is one of those things you've got to go into open-minded, because it's not going to work after the first day, second day, third day. It's a time thing. And you've got it. You are going to have to put in the work. If you do, you got to change your whole mindset, and that's taken however old you are years to form that way. And so you've got to expect a little bit of time to rewire those neural pathways. But the second scenario some of our listeners may also resonate with is they're in a 9-to-5 current situation. Again, they're a little bit time poor, but they do maybe want to pursue something else, like maybe a side hustle. So this is maybe they're already doing a little bit of the self-care thing, but their fulfillment, their career is not really fueling them, and they just want to search for that thing that really, helps them link up with their purpose. How would you even get them starting to, find out what that is, or get, I guess, investigating what else they could do? Because I know a lot of people come to me and they say, I just want to start a side hustle. And I'm like, what for? Like, what do you like? So what tips would you have to sort of steer those people?
Yeah, well, I guess it's funny because I get a lot of these kind of people as well. And I think, I don't want to keep going over what I've said, but a lot of it comes down to that awareness and even just putting yourself out there in different situations to find out what it is that lights you up. For me, it was very much getting my job, writing down what all of my jobs were. So in terms of job roles, sorry, I should say. So all the different jobs I've had, I'd write down all the responsibilities. And then I literally went through and highlighted in yellow what made me feel really good and I loved and I thought were my strengths. And then all of the things that I hated doing or would leave on my to-do list for as long as possible. And then from there, once I brought that awareness to those things, I started to try to surround myself in either jobs or things that allowed me to sit in that place, more in that spot of positivity. Sorry, that might not make sense, but I guess the example would be like, so in my old job, I used to do a lot of interviewing for like live streams. Live stream was like a big thing back then, and I guess Instagram lives had just really started. And so I would interview entrepreneurs about their stories for all of our like online blogs and Instagram and stuff. And like, it would really light me on fire. Like, I just felt like I was so outside of my comfort zone when I was doing that. But it also, like, I was just felt alive. Like, I felt so alive. And so for me, that was a huge awareness piece that was a piece of the puzzle that was really missing in the job that I was currently doing. And so, I guess that's where the idea for the podcast came from, because I realized having those conversations was quite nourishing. So I think bringing, you can start slow like that if it's in your job, if it's, even going back to what I said earlier, but around how you feel in certain situations. Like, how do you feel when you're with your friends? How do you feel when you're out exercising? How do you feel? Like, a huge awareness for me was an old boss used to send me all of these. I was a marketing manager, so he used to send me all of these marketing and business podcasts to listen to, and YouTube things to watch. And when I actually thought about it, I could never find the time, and I'm doing that in quotation marks, I could never find the time to watch those, yet I always, every morning, found time to listen to a health podcast. And so I created that awareness of, okay, maybe my passion doesn't lie in being in marketing. It actually, sits in the health space. And then I started to take notice of the conversations that I was having with my friends and what made me feel fulfilled and what left me being like, oh my God, I'm like so emotionally exhausted about talking to this. I didn't like talking about people or situations, but I loved giving people advice on health or, books to read or recipes to cook. Like, that lit my soul on fire. So I think if you are trying to figure out those passions, I didn't know what mine was, but it came back to that, creating that awareness for the things that made me feel good. And I think a lot of it comes down to what makes you feel good in life, really. Like, that's when the more you are doing what makes you feel good, the more you just become a magnet for what you actually want in your life.
Yeah, for sure. And I love that. It's a bit like a personal SWOT analysis when you think about it. So
definitely,
if this is you and you resonate with this, I think some key takeaways would be to have a think about the roles you've had and the things you really enjoyed and really disliked about all of those roles. And then I think we could even stretch that to people you spend time with, people that really fill you up and people that don't. They make you feel like pretty crap and, just like in a negative sort of headspace, and what things you like or dislike about those people. And then combined, you can sort of start to paint a picture of what would your ideal fulfillment space look like, and kind of workshop from there. So I love everything you've shared today, and I'm really glad.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, I went on a few tangents.
No, as I said, I love tangents. And I'm happy that the hammering held out for us for the most part.
Yeah, no, it's done well. I would say I loved what you said though about the SWOT analysis, and I guess I took a lot from my own experiences because that's the only way that I, can really teach. But a really powerful exercise that I actually did during a manifestation course last year, which her name's Holly as a party, if anyone wants to look her up. But it was like a mindset and manifestation course, and she actually got us at the start to write out our dream day. So what does your dream day actually look like? And really feel it. Like, I feel like it's really powerful to do a meditation or something before it and really feel like connect the emotions with, the pen on your paper and feeling that, visualize yourself in your magical day. And then what you can do is go through that day and then find out what's not aligning with your current situation as well. So that's a really powerful one. I guess that more gets into the manifestation side of things, but that's also just a really powerful one to bring awareness to what's serving you and what's not. Because I think, all of this comes down to, your awareness of what's serving you and what's not serving you. Those toxic relationships are not serving you. Those empty conversations are not serving you. What is serving you? What's helping you be the best version of yourself?
Absolutely. And once you get clear on that, it becomes so much easier to not feel guilty about saying no, or, about making that time for yourself. So I think that's great.
Definitely.
And, if anyone loves, I guess, that vibe, that sort of content, you should definitely go check out the podcast, The Healthy Hustlers. I'll pop a link to the podcast in the show notes below, because I know a lot of your content is centered around self-awareness, and you interview so many incredible people. So I would definitely recommend everyone go check it out too. But if anyone wants to connect with you personally or the podcast, other than jumping over with the link, what's another way that they might be able to keep up with everything you're doing?
Yeah, for sure. Oh, thank you for asking. And thank you so much for having me. I've loved our chat. So I hang out on Instagram. It's just Madelyn Carafa. And as I mentioned during the chat, I'm also a contributor for WellWeb, which is a new dimension of wellness. It's a video streaming site. So I've got lots of healthy recipes and nourishing conversations with mums on there. So, but the podcast is definitely, my number one hangout and where I put all my love and energy.
Beautiful. Well, I'll have to check out that wellness web, and I'll pop a link to that in the show notes below. But I just want to thank you so much for your time. I love everything you're doing. As I mentioned, I've been following your podcast for a while now, so it's really nice to have you on the show as well. And I can't wait to keep seeing all the incredible things you're doing. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. I so appreciate your time and appreciate you having me on the show.
You're welcome. And that's a wrap for this week, Balancers. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope you found this episode useful to some degree in either steering or determining your definition of balance today. As always, the biggest compliment for us is if you share this episode with someone who you feel might need it, or if you're on Spotify, you can click follow, or on Apple Podcasts, you can leave a rating or review. If you have any suggestions for up and coming podcasts, feel free to shoot us a DM or an email. Our Instagram is @thebalancetheory and our email is thebalancetheorypodcast@gmail.com. Otherwise, you've always got the option of subscribing to our mailing list. We only send you email reminders when the episodes drop, so you get them fresh out of the oven. No annoying spam, we promise. I hope you enjoy the rest of your week, and until next time, stay balanced.